Hello and welcome to the crux of medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the crux of medtech.
So, Jannis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So first question to kick off with is, when did you first realize that you could change how we see inside the human brain?
This was during my PhD at ETH Zurich. We were working on a small animal research device with the same imaging technology. And through the collaboration with the university hospital, we were made aware of that Alzheimer drugs are on the horizon. And once they're there, we need massively more imaging capacity. And that's when we started our project to develop a small dedicated system just for that purpose.
Okay, cool. How did you see that was a problem that needed to be solved?
We realized that this has the potential to double the number of exams done in that imaging modality called PET, positron emission tomography, and that the way of scaling that capacity with the existing large whole body devices was grossly inefficient.
Okay. So what was the aha moment where you realized that? Like, where were you at the time, and who were you with? What was the process?
So we had a very fruitful collaboration between the technical part. So I was in particle physics, building detectors, and positron emission tomography sounds already very particle-like. And then we had the users of this research device, which were biologists, medical doctors, nuclear medicine physicians from the university hospital in Zurich. And so from this, we could have very good conversation about what the doctors actually need and what we as technology people can provide to the doctors.
Okay, amazing. So who was the team that started to pull this together then?
So the core team on the technical side was my PhD supervisor, ETH professor, Günther de Sartori, and his scientist responsible for this instrumentation program, Werner Lustermann. And then on the medical side, we had two co-founders, two professors from, one is a nuclear medicine physician, the other one pharmacologist, toxicologist. And then I had my main operating co-founder, Max Ahnen, from physics as well. So he was also PhD student in physics. And we started this together. And then Alfred Buck and Bruno Weber, the two biologists / nuclear medicine physicians, they guided us on how to build that machine.
Okay, wow. So what got you passionate about this industry to start with? Why did you choose to actually even be doing research in this field initially?
Thank you for the question. It actually allowed me to go quite personal. So as probably almost any family, I also have dementia, Alzheimer cases in my family. So my great-grandmother died with severe dementia. And then after finishing high school, I did a 9-month civil service in Germany in a home for people with dementia, so 21 patients. And so I had this first-hand vision of what it is to live with this dementia from very early stage, very subtle, to really final stage, and what that means for the patients, for the relatives, for the caregivers in general. And so it wasn't a long way to spark my passion when I saw this opportunity that we can actually be a part of solving this for future generations of patients.
Okay, so that personal story, you went into the research side. What was why did you choose to study what you studied, and then how did you actually find yourself linking up what you studied with that passion?
This was very unconscious. So I studied physics because I was good at math and physics. I liked that.
Okay.
So I started studying physics, knowing though that it is a very broad application of that study. So you're not limited to a very specific job, but you can do many, many things with that. And somehow through this very general approach or the general outcome of the study, I then came back to something that I could actually feel very passionate about, which is caring for people with dementia.
Amazing. So let's dive into what Positrigo is actually built. So tell me about the technology and what you've actually built for patients.
Probably everybody in the audience has seen or even experienced one of those large body imaging machines, which is MRI, CT, PET. And that's quite uncomfortable often. It's noisy, it's claustrophobic, and we wanted to achieve something that delivers the same kind of diagnostic information, same quality of images, but much better to use for the doctors, much better to use for the technologists, much better to experience for the patients, while not compromising on diagnostic quality. And this is how we designed our device. So we did very early on with the prototype studies, both in terms of performance, how do the images look like compared to the large body machines, and also how do the patients feel when they actually undergo this procedure compared to when they do it on a whole body machine. And the outcome was they actually feel much better on our device because it's an upright sitting position. You can look out. It's more like a hair drying procedure.
Okay.
Actually, many people associate with that. You go in this chair, then this hood comes over your head, but not over your eyes, and then you get a 10 to 20 minute scan on it.
So why does that really matter? So you said that this is a much better experience, but why does this really matter for this patient?
Many people, especially if they have the suspicion of dementia or Alzheimer's, it's even harder to convince them and to stay compliant with this imaging procedure. And it's just one aspect, but it's an important aspect on like getting those people the help they needed. One of the most important KPIs for the neurologist offices we are working with is how fast can I bring my patient to treatment, or time to needle, some put it. And by this much easier access to the diagnostic information, you can greatly shorten this from several months to a few days, basically.
And why does that shortening of the time period matter so much now more than it ever has done?
We're seeing, especially in the USA, where the treatments against Alzheimer's have been available for 2-3 years. Actually, that's the vision we had 2015, that those treatments would become available, and they did 3 years ago. And since they did, the number of patients that want to have this treatment has drastically risen. And one of the bottlenecks in order to get them to treatment is imaging, get the confirmation that you have depositions in the brain which are the cause of the Alzheimer's syndrome you see.
And why don't patients currently have the fast access to PET scanning?
Well, they could if there were capacity on the large body machines. So there are, of course, PET systems around, and the patients that are on treatment now have most of the time received a whole body scan, just limited to the brain. Now, there are many other indications where this kind of imaging is needed and where the whole body is actually needed. Just to name two, one is cardiology, cardiac scans, perfusion scans. The other one is prostate scans. So prostate cancer diagnosis with PET imaging is on the rise in the US. And that eats up any remaining capacity on those whole body machines. And what we do, we provide a system that makes it very easy to increase capacity to serve the neuro community. And that also serves the other communities. And so we actually enable existing imaging providers to grow capacity. But we also, since the device is so small and easy to use, we also enable neurology offices to bring the system into their practice. And this means it's like at the dentist, you go next door to get your x-ray and then come back to the consultation room. And don't have to wait several months to get an x-ray of your teeth.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So why at the minute does cardio and oncology, why do they have priority over neurology at the moment?
Because until the advent of those disease-modifying treatments in Alzheimer's, there was just a very, very small fraction of all those PET exams that were dedicated to neuro. There were a few in terms of unclear cases of dementia, but probably 90 to 95% of cases were associated with oncology and cardiology, mostly oncology, where you actually need also whole body scans because of metastases. And so neuro is just not on the agenda for those imaging centers because oncology, everybody thinks has to be treated very quickly because, it's growing. And cardiology is the same. If you have a perfusion problem in the heart, you want to treat it fast. And so the perception is neuro anyhow isn't really there. And those two actually need to be solved quite fast. And so if somebody comes with a neuro scan request, not in all cases, but in some cases, this will just not go to the top of the list in terms of priority.
And why does that kind of thought exist? Why up until this point does that exist in this space?
I think it's just because it's new. Nobody has really thought this, and to be honest, until 3 years ago, there wasn't really a market for neuropet because there was no treatment, and this is really driven by the treatment against Alzheimer's, in the future also other brain diseases. So this is a new thought. Until this trickles down to everyone, every patient, every doctor, this takes a while.
So diving into those clinical results that those drugs are getting. So I'm obviously from the medtech space, so I don't really know about the clinical trials results of those Alzheimer's drugs, but how is that transforming the treatment of Alzheimer's these days?
So for many, many years, more than 20 years, there has not been a single new drug approved in the field of Alzheimer's. And this has led to this most of the major pharma firms have dropped or at least scaled down their Alzheimer programs. And there was one drug that actually also came from Zurich. That's why Zurich was such a good ecosystem to start. Actually showed first sign that not only does the drug remove those depositions, but they also slow down cognitive decline. And this happening led to a breakthrough in the field. Now you could finally, or for the first time in many years, do something about the progression of the disease itself. And this, of course, drives a lot of patient volume.
Does that cognitive decline slow down when that drug's used, even in people without Alzheimer's?
That is a good question. So the scientific answer to that is there are trials underway to measure that. Roche is launching a trial this year to study what happens if you give such a drug to patients that do not show cognitive symptoms yet. And it's a phase 3, so they expect a positive outcome, which in my view makes sense. Huh? I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm a physicist, but how I understand the disease is you have 20 years or up to 20 years of buildup of those depositions in the brain before you get cognitive symptoms. And so it's a plausible hypothesis that if you remove those depositions earlier, you might have a more efficient slowdown or even a prevention of the cognitive symptoms. But then again, the Roche trial will show. And Lilly is, I think, running a similar trial, and also Biogen. Lilly and Biogen are the two that actually do have an FDA-approved drug.
Fair enough. Well, that's pretty awesome to even learn about. So super cool. I want to jump back into the company journey though, and go from day one when you pulled this all together and the steps you took from there. So give me a bit of a description about how, when you took this on, how did you think about solving this challenge initially, and how did you pull together what is a company now?
Yes. So the very, very first step was actually to document and gather the requirements that such a device must have in order to be accepted and successful on the clinic side. And that's what we did. At the same time, ETH had a very good program, an incubator program, where 2 physics PhDs like myself and my co-founder could actually learn in an accelerated way what else we need to know in order to run a business, because physics is great, but it doesn't help you to run the company.
Sure.
So there was a steep learning curve there as well. And I'm very happy and also thankful to say that I think we managed quite well over the past years to grow the company, grow ourselves, and learn what is necessary on the way to take something which is an idea to a prototype, to a medical device development process, to an approved medical device, and now to a commercially successful medical device.
Sure. So when you started all of this, so first of all, actually, is this the same program that Nanoflex Robotics has come out of as well? Is it the Weiss Zurich?
I don't know. I don't know Nanoflex.
Fair.
But if it's ETH, it's probably the same program. It's called, the program we were in is called ETH Pioneer Fellowship.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you talked about that journey. Like what was your role initially when you were pulling this together?
So at the beginning, I was a PhD student. Mm-hmm. Then we had this ETH Pioneer Fellowship, which is where you are on a postdoc position basically in ETH, but you get your own budget. And then once we got our first VC investment in early 2020, we made the jump into the Positrigo company, and then I was CEO.
Okay, cool. So how did you go about getting that initial investment? What were you taking to the VCs at that point?
At that point, we were taken to the VCs. We started with a half-built prototype, and at the end, we had a fully built prototype.
Sure.
Then the idea that this is actually something that has enormous potential once disease-modifying therapies are available. And we found one VC, Fox Ventures, that actually believed in that together with us. It was tough though, and there were many ups and downs, because I mentioned this first drug that also came out of Zurich, also Biogen, but not the same that it is now approved. And there was a lot of ups and downs in the clinical trial and also in the commercial launch. It's not available anymore on the market. And those ups and downs we felt very hardly and positively, depending on whether it was a down or an up, throughout the process. We had one investor, term sheet signed, everything like ready to execute. And on the day before signing, Biogen announced that they dropped that study.
Wow.
And they pulled the deal. And I mean, Biogen's market cap went down several dozens of billions.
Yeah, of course.
But us, it cost us our first investment.
What did you do about that?
Prolong a bit the time at ETH. So we got another grant and also a donation to run the ETH program, and then keep going. It's a marathon to get investment, not a sprint. So,
did you ever worry that at that point that this might not happen?
Always. So we always thought there's always a chance this doesn't happen. Venture capital, it's high risk, can fail at any point in time for various reasons. In the end, though, I was convinced that the product is great and the market will be there. And then I took the position, well, if we are able with that conviction to convince somebody to fund this, then we keep going. And that's what we always did.
Incredible. So when you got that, I think it was Fox Ventures, did you?
Yes.
Yeah, Fox Ventures. When you got that investment and they decided to join you on the journey and this starts coming to a company, what was the next stage after that, and how did you start pulling this together?
In hindsight, so the first step was basically from the university prototype to medical device, and this is basically what Fox enabled us to do with the help of other investors on the way. And then came the point in time, so we received FDA clearance as well as CE mark, both in 2024 after around 4.5 years, with around 15 million Swiss francs of investment. And then the question was, how do we now bring it to the market? So we prepared some grounds. We, of course, built our network of potential first customers, mostly KOLs. And then we were looking starting in end of 2023 for an investor that can help us on that journey, which is a very different journey than taking it from a university prototype to regulatory clearance. Sure. And then finally, last year in summer 2025, we found HealthCap as a new lead investor and another Polish venture fund called Navivo that funded this part that is now in execution. So the first 10 devices sold and partially installed to be ready for growth financing.
Amazing. So that next stage in terms of the device installation, what's it been like to finally see it get into clinics compared to that 2018?
Well, it was mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. In our preparation, I told you the story about October 24th. So our vision was to get this into the in-office space, to make the like the X-ray at the dentist. And not our first installation, but our second installation. So the first installation was an imaging center, but the second installation in the US was a neurology office. And when they scanned their first 4 patients, October 24th, it was absolutely mind-blowing for me to see, and even more so for the doctors. I mean, the doctors know what they would get, but when they saw the first patient image and the patient was right there with them still, it absolutely changes how we can treat those patients, because it's not 6 months later that we see the images. Patient might be gone, they might have missed the treatment window, they might not be interested anymore, they might have progressed too far. And so said, this is really now we can be so much faster, so much better. We can also order another test if you need to. And this completely changes how we treat and diagnose those patients.
Amazing. Yeah. So is that what keeps on driving you through to this next stage?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We are now working on some partnerships that I cannot disclose yet, but we are having partners that will help us scale this in the neurology office. So to go a bit into this first client, they are the Neuron Clinic. They are a group of around 15 physicians, neurologists, distributed over 6 locations in Southern California. Very community friendly, so very close to their patients. And they have an amazing director of medical operations that helped them to set up everything you need in order to get such a program going. So starting with reimbursement, payer contracts, going to licensing for the device, logistics of the radioactive tracer, which is also something you need to be willing to do, construction, shielding of the walls. We needed just very limited shielding needed, but still one wall was needed. And going about with all of those things, this was a major program, and without him, it would have been very hard. And that's something that not many practices will take upon themselves. So we're working with some partners that have made this very easy for cardiologists to take those imaging in-house. And they're very eager to do this now with us in this new neurology space as an area of growth for them, with the experience in like this operational side of things and with our device that is very much tailored to the use case.
I want to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical device development. With deep scientific and engineering expertise, they help medtech teams crack tough development challenges and make the right calls early, reducing rework, delays, and uncertainty later on. Whether you're navigating uncharted technical territory or racing towards market, TTP brings clarity and real-world judgment to the decisions that shape performance, usability, and manufacturability. By retiring risk early and grounding innovation in real-world constraints, they help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes. What's the next steps around reimbursement for the product?
Reimbursement is all settled, so we can use existing reimbursement codes. The pro forma P&L that we present our neurology customers is very convincing. It typically doesn't take longer than a few minutes for them to realize that it's actually a no-brainer, so to say, from an economic perspective, and it really quickly goes into like what are the operational things we need to address before we can actually go live with the program. To give you another example with the first customer, they started with a calculation of 20 to 30 patients per month. Again, started October 24th. By December, they were close to 100 patients per month, and they have already signed for device number 2 and 3 for the other locations.
Wow.
So that's how great the need is for this kind of devices, and also how this fits very well into the general economics of such a practice.
Sure. And so your main motivation at the minute is obviously to please those initial customers and land and expand in the US, basically. So
I'm glad you say land and expand. Is exactly how we named our go-to-market strategy.
Very good. So yeah, when you land and expand in the US, like where are you going first? Is it trying to break into that California area? Are you taking on the whole of the US? Is there certain volume centers that seem to be more?
So the principle we see is that this belt from California over Arizona, Texas, and Florida is the main market at the moment. So we have a lot of traction in California. We have a lot of traction in Florida. We have also traction in Texas, and we are also in final negotiations with a large imaging center chain. Close to 100 locations nationwide in Arizona. So that's the first location because they also want to go. They see the need for this.
Amazing. So the European side of things, then we've talked a little bit about the US so far, but you've got CE mark at a similar time as the FDA clearance. So what's the European thoughts around this technology and taking it there?
So the Europeans have, unfortunately, difficult burden to bear, namely that the regulators took 3 years longer to approve those drugs. So Europe is around 3 years behind. So UK was actually one of the first countries to approve those disease-modifying treatments, and the European Union followed only last year. And so we are still developing that infrastructure to get those patients to those drugs to the patients. And in the meantime, we have to be very opportunistic. We said we focus on 5 key countries, which is Germany, France, Spain, UK, and Italy. Switzerland not named because it's our home country anyway.
Sure.
And we do see some traction. So one of our installations last year went to Munich, to the LMU. They went live in December and also very much using the device. Another one is going to Genoa in Italy in April. And we have also distributors appointed in France and Spain. And so we want to tender, for example, in France for easier procurement. So there is some traction in Europe. We more see it as upside to our projection than actually a significant portion of the market today.
Sure.
This will likely change when those treatments are more advanced and the payer decision has been made. And we are basically at the same level as the US now in a bit of time.
Very nice. So what's holding you back going and giving all those people these devices?
First of all, it's a capital equipment. So we try to mitigate this a bit on the sales side by offering also pay-per-use models. And we do have a financing solution in place for that to be able to offer this. At the same time, those practices also need some things to prepare either themselves or with one of those partners that I mentioned. So there is a time to installation that needs to be adhered to. Otherwise, I think it's a very blue ocean, a very green field that we can go into, and we will. Production following, of course, our sales orders.
Amazing. So what are you most excited about for what comes next?
I'm very excited to see that this idea of bringing the system closer to the patient by putting it into the neuro offices actually works. So, and now it's about executing that. So I said we have this first pilot with a neuron clinic, and now expanding that to the next 10 neurologists and then to the next 20, and then really accelerating the pace on how we get this to the doctors and to patients over the next 24 months. Really exciting to see, and really also you can directly see the effect it has on the patients because they will be faster on the treatment. You can monitor when you can actually stop the treatment, and you can also monitor when people might have to go on the treatment again after they stop, because there's a buildup of depositions, and enabling doctors to do this so much better than before is really fulfilling. Really excited about this.
Excellent. So what do you see as the future of Alzheimer's treatment then? So I know we've obviously got the scanning and we've got the drugs and the therapeutics, but more the patient population, like everyone knows someone who's had Alzheimer's, yes. Like it affects everyone. Like where does this actually go to in your mind?
I think the interesting point will be preventive intervention. And that's where I have high hopes on blood tests. So there's been a lot of research and a lot of good news on the blood test front in order to get a screening result. And once we are there at a very mature level of those blood tests, we will have a tool to pre-select the patient population even before going into symptoms. Okay. And then this will also, of course, give a lot of patients to our system, because all the blood test results will have to be confirmed and validated by imaging. And that's what we then can offer on a large scale. And so I'm very much looking forward to the time where, like, for example, in prostate cancer also, you get a blood test every year, say. You see, you can rule out if it's negative, it's negative. If it's positive or inconclusive, you will then be sent to a PET scan, hopefully in our system, to confirm, and then start treatment as early as possible.
So what are the biomarkers in the bloodstream that show Alzheimer's?
There are numerous ones. One is so let me start with the biomarkers in the brain that PET can image. So PET can image amyloid deposition in the brain, and this is also what's targeted by the drugs.
Forgive my lack of knowledge. What's the amyloid?
Amyloid is a misfolded protein, extracellular, that forms plaques and over time is then neurotoxic.
Okay.
And the drugs targeted exactly this protein. And where our imaging technology comes from, doctors have, and let me go even further back in time.
Please.
So the very first Alzheimer patient studied by Dr. Alzheimer, he did an autopsy on the brain after Mrs. Dieter, that was her name, died. And he saw those plaque depositions in the pathology by some coloring chemicals. I'm not a doctor, so forgive my my a bit layman's terms of what I use. And what the researchers have done on the PET side, they have used this colorant and found an in vivo method to make it visible. And that's what our machine can see. So we can basically do the same as Dr. Alzheimer, but we don't have to wait for the patient to die. We can do it actually in vivo. And now, so we can actually show that those depositions are there, and the treatments can remove those depositions. Now, blood tests and also spinal tap assays, they always were or are compared against the PET scan. Because they show that there's actually an excess or lack of certain proteins in the bloodstream, or a ration of certain protein that somehow correlates with the PET results. And that's what they're trying to see, to like find a more accessible and cheap version to do at least the ruling out of the Alzheimer's pathology. Since PET is still the gold standard against compared, you want to do that as a confirmatory scan afterwards.
Do we have any theories around why Alzheimer's actually happens originally?
There's lots and lots of debates about this. This is probably a topic for a series of podcasts. So what is fairly certain to say is there's two protein. They already named amyloid, extracellular, and then there's also another protein called tau, and that is intracellular, that also causes damage. The good news is you can also use PET in our system to make the tau visible. And that's actually also a future potential way of intervention. So there's several drugs also under development and in trials that target tau. And there's high hopes that you can make the treatment even more efficient if you combine anti-amyloid and anti-tau.
That's really cool. But then we go back to the actual cause of Alzheimer's. What are we thinking that like lifestyle choices? Is there anything that puts together? Is it genetics? What do we think really causes it?
Yes, I have to repeat my disclaimer. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, sure.
But that being said, what I've learned in interacting with doctors over the last years in this field is it's almost always the same things: it's exercise, healthy living, not smoking, activity, all of those things that have a positive impact on whether or not you develop Alzheimer's. And then there's also the genetic disposition. Actually, those drugs in their indications for use have certain exclusions based on your genotype. So there's a gene called ApoE4. If you have one or even two copies of that gene, then you have an elevated risk of actually getting Alzheimer's disease.
Fascinating. So when we think about the future of Positrigo and where the company goes to next, where does it go beyond neurology, or where does it go beyond Alzheimer's treatment? Have you got future indications and expansions in mind?
Yes, we do have other present and many future applications that we can see. The difference I would like to emphasize is at the whole body PET system, the need for everything metastatic, like systemic, that goes to everywhere in the body. As soon as I have a disease that is limited to the brain, our system can be of help. And Alzheimer is a big case. Parkinson's might be another case. Epilepsy is a case. Primary brain tumors like glioblastoma is a case where there are specific tracers to give you a lot of information to treat your patients better. And so we always focus on the Alzheimer because it's a big case and it's the first that drives that, but there are many others that will become relevant in the future. And so we see additional indication that will drive the adoption of the system and also expand this. I give you one example. For example, in Parkinson's, you can today do a DAT scan. DAT scan takes a long time, 40, 50 minutes. And it takes even longer if you have the disease. And that is a problem because many people probably know that Parkinson is associated with tremors. Mm-hmm. And this makes the imaging actually worse over time because it gets blurry. And there are PET tracers on the horizon that will help you with assessing this in PET, and then you can do it in 10 to 20 minutes. And so this might be another potential use case for the future. Other than that, we will focus on expanding our footprint, giving access to more and more systems. And this is embedded in this overall trend of decentralizing healthcare, bringing it close to the patients, which is particularly true in the US, where you have very widely spread infrastructure sometimes, but imaging was always very central. And this naturally limits access to this kind of technology for people that don't live in the centers, that have to travel 1 or 2 hours to get there. And so this is our plan.
Awesome. What have you had to change on your personal leadership style as you've managed through these different transition periods to today?
For me, it's a constant growth demand, because starting in the beginning was a very, very different skill set than it's now. And so far, I managed to keep up my personal growth with the growth of the company. And that's also what I intend to do in the future. But it is hard work.
So how do you do that? How do you move through these stages? What's the kind of things you do to make sure you consistently grow and learn?
It requires a great level of discipline and self-awareness. And I like to think of it as somehow a team effort. And and then how I do this, on the board of directors, on the advisory board, as personal mentors, I was very lucky, and I'm very thankful that I found many people that helped me on this way to get where I am now. And I'm also confident they will help me, and I'll find even more people that will help me going forward.
Who's the person who has mentored you the most? Who's had the biggest impact on your journey?
I think I don't want to answer this question
because there's too many good ones.
Yes, indeed.
No, I hear you on that one.
Yeah.
So what?
My answer could be there are many on the way that cover different aspects.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So what would be some of the biggest lessons you've learned from those mentors? What stands out to you in your mind as one of the biggest things that's impacted you in your journey?
I think one of the key learnings is there's always an option. It's like never give up, and even if the situation is absolutely desperate, and I'm sure every startup founder or manager can relate to that, there are sometimes really impossible situations, and keeping that mindset of I want to play to win, which I attribute to one of my mentors.
Okay.
and keep the focus on what can I do to get closer to this goal to win. This has been essential in getting through this.
Incredible. So we've chatted before this that we're both going to LSI later. Well, it'll be this month. Yeah. So tell us more about the fundraising journey and what's coming next.
Yes. So I'm very thankful that we always found the right investors to guide us through different stages of the company. So we mentioned 4 folks in the early stage. HealthCap joined last year to go with us through commercialization together with Navivo. And now we're looking for an investor that will go with us through the scale-up of the commercialization. Growth, building the sales organization, go from commercial proof of concept, first 10 systems, to a growing medtech business. And this is something we want to do throughout this year. Now that we have actually validation in the different customer segments. And so we will launch a financing quite soon.
And what are you looking for from that investor? Apart from money.
Well, ideally, it's someone that has very detailed know-how and experience in medtech capital equipment, has gone through this with in the past with companies from, say, a few million of revenue to tens of millions of revenue, that have a clear picture on how the US healthcare system, the US market works for such goods, because the US is the most important market for us. An investor that also challenges us and helps us refining our strategy up until exit, because we are already a VC-backed company, so exit is a topic. We do have good connections to the major strategics through our board members and also our management team. If the investor can add to that even more, this would be the dream investor. Amazing.
So talked a little bit about the investors and what we're looking for from them, but how much are you actually raising at the moment?
We are looking at a 25 to 35 million round as of today.
Okay, and is that going to enable you to go all the way through to profitability through that?
Yes. I have to say profitability is always for me a trade-off between growth and profitability.
Sure.
And so can we go to profitability with this? Yes. Do we want this? To be decided. I think the most important goal here is to be exit ready, and that meaning strategic, looking at us seriously. Siemens and GE Healthcare are the two obvious ones. There might be others more pharma related as well, or even a private equity fund at some point.
Sure. And why are those the options? Do you not think IPO might be on the cards for this company, given the transformational potential?
Excellent question. I like this. We have looked at this thoroughly, and I'm not someone that excludes this option in general, but I think it's very unlikely, and there are many reasons for that. First of all, we are typically strategic case, because the value of the company is much more driven by synergistic effects and potential for the strategics. Starting with the radiopharmaceutical business. So I mentioned briefly the tracer. That's a huge business. Basically, they are selling printer cartridges and we are selling printers.
Okay. Yeah.
So they will make much more money with the printer cartridges than the devices. So there is value. And then on the stock exchange, we would always be valued by pure financial metrics, which is much less attractive than those synergistic values. That being said, and then the second thing is, for an IPO, I honestly believe we need a long-term product roadmap with new products coming along, which is not impossible to develop, but it's something we haven't prioritized because we believe the IPO is anyhow not the main strategic goal at the moment.
Okay, excellent. And a question to top this episode off. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been very fun to spend time with you. What would you like to leave the audience knowing about Positrigo and what comes next?
I would like to leave the audience with the knowledge that, first of all, there are now disease-defying treatments in Alzheimer. You can get access to this. You need PET scans. And Positrigo will be the #1 brain PET system provider for the next years.
Amazing. Thank you, Jannis, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.